am Bisnow's managing editor, and I am NAREE's board chair for 2021. I am very thrilled to have with me here Marilee Hutter. She is the 2022 chair of the Counselors of Real Estate Professional Association. She is president of City Venture Associates LLC Denver, advising clients and municipalities on public-private partnerships, urban and transit-oriented development, and organizational strategy. She was previously an executive vice president at the Urban Land Institute, transit-oriented development specialist for the Regional Transportation District in Denver, regional vice president of Trillium Corporation, and director of asset management for the city and county of Denver. I want to welcome up Marilee.
Well, good morning. It's great to be with you and be back with NAREE. We look forward to this every year. I'm Marilee Hutter. I'm chair of the Counselors. What's that? Real Estate for 2022. So it's really a pleasure. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Counselors, here, we're a global real estate organization made of real estate experts and advisors from around the world. Our byline is solving the world's real estate problems. And it's an organization where people are invited to join based on their ethics, based on their expertise and their recognition, and also based on the quality of the independent advice that they give to their customers and their clients. You can tell by some of the things we've accomplished that we really have tremendous membership, pretty small, about 1,000 people, but quite a network of resources for you if you're interested. The Top 10 is one of our hallmark programs and initiatives that we do it every year, and we look primarily at the U.S. market here and the underlying trends in real estate. There's lots of statistics that happen, and they change all the time, as you know better than anybody. But what is the underlying dynamics that go on that you'll see played out over the course of the next year? This is an annual publication. We usually release it mid-year, but since 21 is almost done, we're going to be focusing more on what you can expect in 2022. So the way we do this is we go backwards. Let's start with number 10, bifurcation of capital markets. There's a mouthful for you to start with. The U.S. is the healthiest economy in the world. We are the dominant global currency, still hold 62%, I think, of the world's money is held in U.S. dollars. That means that there's lots of capital coming into the U.S. market, and there's a lot of pressure for those investors to spend that capital and to invest. What we're seeing this year, though, is those investments are not going equally. There are clearly winners and there's losers going on. Let's see. So the haves are pretty to be expected. You know this story pretty well. Industrial, residential, really doing well. Life sciences emerged strong. Actually, there's parts of retail, the open air centers, the strip malls, the community centers, they're doing pretty well. The have-nots, again, not so surprising. The office having trouble, malls, who's built a mall in a long time, lodging in particular in the hospitality industry. So Green Street has their all property index that they do every year, and they showed that the average of all property types was up 8% from 2019 to 2021. In other words, post-pandemic, if you think that's where we are, they're up 8%. Actually, it was up 18% for 20 to 21. So that was across all types. In our loser category, though, those categories were not able to keep up. And so the haves were seeing cap rates very low, 3 and 4, sometimes 5%. Not so good on the other side. So what does that mean? Well, in terms of real estate implications for that, lots of activity. Everybody you talk to in the industry is busy. Well, the reason they're busy is not only because there's a lot of deals flowing around trying to get done, because deals are still really hard to do. People are looking at the quality of the leases. How committed are those leases? The banks and the lenders are holding down loan-to-value kind of calculations. It's really complicated to get these done, but people are trying hard, and there's a lot of activity in the market. What you also see is a lot of interest in value add and in adaptive reuse as development types to try to get higher yields. These cap rates are so low. So let's talk about a little bit more about adaptive reuse. That's trend number 9 for us this year. You know, I used to think adaptive reuse was fixing up an old building, maybe in a historic district or something. Adaptive reuse 2.0, though, is more focused on what we used to call gray fields, the big boxes, the malls that have been abandoned and shut down. They're everywhere. They're urban, they're suburban. You see them, they're kind of blighting influences. And now there's such a large property type, over 50,000 of them around the US. They're larger than the self-storage industry, which is hard to imagine. What's also different about these properties is these are larger parcels. It's not a single building somewhere. These are large parcels. Often they're surrounded by roads, residential density, a market around them. These are very attractive sites. And so a lot is starting to happen. We have seen for a while where big boxes, you'll see a big box sitting there and all of a sudden it's been turned into a church or into a library or into a community center or something. But now what's happening is they're adding real density to those sites because they can. This land is really valuable. So they're adding residential. They're adding co-working. Out in the suburbs, they're starting to add co-working. Clinics, healthcare, other kinds of community things are being added. This adds value to the property, and it also can turn around neighborhoods that are struggling and by the blight that they're creating. So the real estate implications. Well, obviously, if you own the property, it's a great opportunity to improve your yields, and so that's attractive. But there's a challenge to this, because real estate owners and investors are not the same as developers. Developers, totally different business, different skills, much different level of risk-taking involved. So not everybody can do it. That said, when they do it well, it really can be transformational, and a lot of people are looking to this very eagerly. We are indeed urbanizing the suburbs, talked about that for a long time, but it's really happening largely through this adaptive reuse. And there's also huge pressure out there among the regulators and actually in the market for both DEI and ESG kind of factors. People want to see attainable housing built into it. They want to see it integrated with transit. They want to know what kind of community services, what kind of cultural things are you putting in there? Is it walkable? What kind of open space amenities? Do you have trails? You know, this is unheard of in the past, but because of these large parcels, people can ask for that. Trend number 8, economic structural change. I mean, we all know the pandemic has upended our systems. It's created great uncertainty into our systems. And we know it's not going away. The resistance to the vaccines has kept us in this kind of endemic situation. If the US is vaccinated at about 60%, Europe is less than 45%, parts of Africa are less than 5%. I mean, that we are in a global economy, we know that. And that means that we are kind of in this permanent endemic, which means new strains will keep developing. And that means that we have to start planning. Businesses and individuals have to just plan for how we're going to live with these future pandemics that we know are coming. These pandemics have also reinforced all the social inequities that we're seeing in our country right now. Some of these numbers are amazing. We're still 4 million jobs down from before the pandemic. 50%, half of all renters in America last year lost income. How long will they be able to continue and where? Small business closures are up 30%. Those are huge numbers. So the foundations of our economy are in flex, and this is a big thing. you know, we don't know what impact the stimulus will have or has had so far. We can't sort it out from the other impacts. What about the national debt? You know, we're up to about 133% of GDP. Is that high? Too high? Is it okay? Some economists say one thing, some say the other. What about inflation? Up to 6%. Well, boy, that's a big change from what we've been. But is it more like 1947 after World War II when it went to 22% and dropped like a rock when things settled out? Or is it more like the 1970s? I mean, people don't know what to make of the numbers. The numbers are out there, but the models aren't working. Stock market's up and down every day. Even the Fed is confused. And you see, you know, the recent meeting, the announcements that came out of that were kind of mind-spinning. So we need new models. Yeah, that's way undervaluing all the risks when the ground is changing out there in our world. And I think what they're doing is just ignoring it. It's hard to quantify, they're ignoring it. Maybe a little bit of the ostrich in the sand kind of thing going on. What you see going on is much more focus on controlling what you can. I'm going to take care of my buildings, my portfolio, take care of my cash flow. They're managing what they can and just trying to buy time until things stabilize. Till we get stories that are coherent, make sense, and they know how to look towards the future again. What you also see going on is a lot more interest in value add to increase those yields because the cap rates are so low. And so what this means is kind of minor building improvements. When you buy something at a price, an underperforming asset, if you think you can increase the occupancy or you think you can increase the rents, maybe if I fix up the lobby a little bit, the bathrooms, I can raise the rents by 5%. That kind of thing. That's going on. Again, people hungry for yield because they're all so low right now. Next is political polarization. This is not new in the world or certainly in the US. It's been going on for a long time, but it's worse than we have seen in our lifetimes. The counselors aren't taking sides here, and we welcome vigorous debate. These are hard problems, so we're glad people are thinking hard about it. But what we want to call attention to is that the division itself is causing more damage than probably any of the policies that they're considering. Congress, it turns out, is more divided than the public as a whole. If the polls constantly show that even what we consider the most contentious, difficult issues, the public comes together on. But this tribal politicism of things is really hurting our recovery, hurting our economy. You know, it's stopping our economic growth and damaging real estate dramatically. So, both sides talk about their fear for the future of democracy, but they're both contributing to the problem. Where is the Venn diagram that shows the overlapping areas of agreement, the common areas that everybody outside the Beltway knows exist? We're not seeing that show up. Our economy and real estate would be far healthier if this party line voting could be replaced with something that's far more foundational to democracies. The great art of calling politics the art of compromise. We want to see that. The implications on real estate have been profound. This delayed recovery and the inaction is really hurting the real estate market in many ways. Take, for example, immigration. You know, this is the U.S.'s secret sauce. The cuts that we've suffered and then the inaction on that has hurt construction, hotels, restaurants who depend on these workers. Retail, many kinds of retail, are really struggling because we can't come to terms with a coherent immigration policy. Healthcare, this is directly tied to our workforce, their mobility and their productivity. Infrastructure has always been the backbone of real estate. Climate change, you know, the same thing. Not only the real estate assets themselves that are at risk by all the wildfires and sea level rise and all that. It's the spin-off industries, like the insurance industry, finance, and also the labor markets. It's a big deal. Issue number 6, housing supply and affordability. Now there's a surprise, right? This has been on the top 10 before. It's not new. What's new is that this isn't just about affordable housing, subsidized housing. We now have a crisis of all non-luxury housing going on in the country. We've been underbuilding for 20 years, all housing types. And both the prices and the rents are across the board up an average of 16 to 18% in 2021 over this last year, even with all the problems we're seeing. Less than 5% of that housing is geared to workforce people. There's this, people talk about the jobs workforce mismatch. Why are so many people out of work when there's so many jobs that aren't filled? A big part of that is because people can't afford to move to the cities where their jobs are. And a big part of that affordability is the housing costs in the cities. So what we're seeing is that companies are actually moving now where the workers are and where the workers want to be. Richard Florida talked about this years ago, right, in his first book. What's different now is it isn't because they want to live by the ocean. People are moving where they can afford to get a house or rent an apartment even. So the implications for real estate are big. And you can't help but ask, who's to blame for this? Developers are all not all of them, are greedy jerks. There's actually some pretty nice stuff. But it's a tough business. And, they depend on money from their investors, and investors want the highest yield, so they're drawn to building the most profitable products. The big topic you're going to see emerging is this missing middle, this workforce housing. 80% of renters make $36,000 to $60,000 a year. That means they can afford to pay $1,000 to $1,500 a month on their residence. We're not building enough product at that point. And the government is paying a lot of attention to that. They're putting a lot of pressure, both at the local and the national level. At the local level, they're changing zoning laws. They're putting in inclusionary housing. Once in a while they offer an incentive. The federal government has said they're taking all kinds of administrative actions. They're going to try to build 100,000 affordable units over the next 3 years. So you're going to see a lot of pressure for this. Coming up. This is going to be a real battle and hard to solve. So we decided to move on to an easier one, infrastructure. And the new imperatives coming from that. Like housing, we've talked about infrastructure for several years. We've seen this coming. What's new this year isn't the underfunding of the traditional infrastructure that's been going on for 20 years, roads, bridges, ports, telecommunications, we know that. What's new is that these emerging categories of what we're calling infrastructure and what we've learned the hard way are also essential for a healthy economy. Some are the result of the pandemic, some are the result of climate change, some are just the result of economic disparities that have caused a lot of the political polarization and are causing a lot of the problems in the market right now. And whether you call housing and childcare infrastructure or not, the shortages are causing so much dysfunction throughout the system, and is particularly hitting the worker class. So we're learning that as well. The real estate impacts of this, real estate always follows the money. Wherever there is quality investment, you will see, and quality infrastructure, you will see quality real estate being built. So the communities that are investing, where you see communities putting in new amenities, rebuilding, adding things, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of talk about it. That's where you're going to see the investment. Communities that aren't doing that are going to fall behind. And what you're also going to see is that people like social infrastructure. You put things like schools and parks and childcare, that's going to attract the workers. The workers are going to attract the companies and the jobs are going to help build the markets and the economy. So it's a kind of an interesting long way around to get where we want to be. The federal stimulus money has finally trickled down to the local level. It's taken a long time. It's hard to spend that much money, but you're going to see lots of projects out there over the next 3 or 5 years. And kind of the favorite categories are going to be broadband, electrification, renewables, disaster resilience, and then preparing for this delivery economy that we've all come to rely on. The number 4 issue is logistics, very closely tied to infrastructure, obviously. We define it as the system that kind of uses infrastructure, but moves materials and goods across land, sea, and air to get to the end user. So this is something that we took for granted, kind of, don't notice it till it's gone kind of thing. The pandemic really taught us over the last 2 years what a vulnerable system this is. This is kind of like, imagine the dog in the middle of the freeway at rush hour, right? Even if the dog is only there for 1 minute, the backups in the system are everywhere. They go off on all the side roads, everything gets stopped. Well, no wonder you see the autonomous vehicle business looking at trucks so eagerly. This is a huge gap in our systems. In doing the research, what we found was that a big factor was actually poor demand forecasting. That we had siloed information. The trucking industry didn't know what the ports were doing, and the ports didn't know what the railroads were doing. It wasn't automated as you might think it was. It wasn't just systems flow technology and systems flow. So this is something that really is going to be put attention and worked on. So for real estate, what are the implications here? Well, obviously, prices are up. The producer price index is up 19% in 21. In fact, inflation up about 6%. And so this is a big impact on all parts of real estate and business. But this is a short-term dynamic. Long-term and continuing, we see a lot less reliance on just-in-time delivery systems and inventory systems. People are much more attuned now to this delivery economy. They're nervous about where everything has to come from and if it's going to stay available. So that's really impacting warehouse facilities as well. Maybe they want them closer to the end consumer than closer to the ports. It also means that you're going to have expedited obsolescence in warehouses. They won't be in the right location. They won't have the right technology. And they won't facilitate this important logistical element. You're also seeing interest, investor interest now in the part of the U.S. that's kind of central and southeast, because that part of the country has a lot of ports. It has a lot of roads and highways. It has a lot of rail systems that are in pretty good condition. They're calling it the Golden Triangle. So keep your eye out for that part of the country kind of emerging in a way that it hasn't before. The number 3 topic for us, the issue, is ESG, environmental, social, and governance. This sounds like it's a current buzzword, but I remember, Patagonia is now started 50 years ago, and their whole brand was built on social and environmental responsibility. So it's an older idea, but its time has come. And the counselors, we think it's not at its tipping point. We think it's tipped, and it's going to now become inevitable. And the events of the last 2 years, the pandemic really brought this to the forefront. I think the big deal here, for me, is that for the first time, you really see corporate America thinking about long-term issues and long-term viability more than just a quarterly earnings report. It means they're going to be making, shareholders are forcing them to make decisions in a different way. I mean, environmental concerns still dominate, they're still top of the line. And I would say that this, we're still finding our way. How do you, what measurements do you use? How do you define success? We're not clear on that, whether it's environmental or the social issues or whatever. But there is enormous pressure to just do something. The problems are so big, people want corporate America to step up and do something. So accordingly, you're seeing the investment in funds that invest in those companies doubled in the last year, now up to 50 billion. That's not just walking around money. That really can make a difference. And it's growing all the time. Moody's has started rating 37,000 companies, on what they're doing for their climate control and climate management and their initiatives. Whether the initiatives turn out to be results, that's one of the things we're still figuring out. But the point is, this is now required. It's de rigueur for all these companies. The government is totally involved as well and concerned, whether it's local, state, or federal. So the implications for real estate, again, this is a big deal. ULI did their emerging trends survey. This is not a random survey. Obviously, these are real estate executives. 82% said they think about ESG issues when they're making real estate decisions. Where are they going to invest? How much are they going to invest? What are they going to put it into? They're thinking about it in a different way than they did before. I think this is really interesting. 1,200 private real estate portfolios are voluntarily participating in the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmarking Study. And these aren't small guys. This is JLL, this is BlackRock, Morgan Stanley. Those people are participating because they want to be benchmarked. They want to show it off. And they know this is what the market demands. So driven by consumers and shareholders alike. This is such a long-term trend. We think that actually it's going to become normalized. And it won't be many years before we don't even talk about it anymore because it's just the way we do business. Our number 2 issue, technology, acceleration, and innovation. I mean, if tech has been moving fast before, we're at breakneck speed now. This year, the issue isn't about the technology innovation so much as it is about the acceptance. As one of our members said, it's kind of like World War II in 3 months. Just so much, so fast. And it's, human behavior is really hard to make change, but we're doing that left and right. Remote work, e-commerce, tele everything, all of those are improving by big multiples. And this behavioral change is upon us. We're changing our habits like mad. Let me show you a list here. Some of the behaviors, things that are now old-fashioned that, a year ago were not. So watch in 22, we're going to have even more focus on cybersecurity. Look at this number, ransomware of 100 million a month being paid, and privacy, because also the technology is hitting us there. Impacts on real estate, also a big deal. This is really head spinning for an industry based on fixed assets, where it takes years, sometimes decades, to plan, build, and stabilize an asset. These changes are so fast. But we know that the change in the use of space is permanent. We know that we're going to have faster building obsolescence, which creates a whole bevy of problems in itself. How are we going to define Class A buildings, Class B buildings, Class C buildings? That's all changing. How and which of the high rises can be repurposed? Can they be saved? It's a huge issue. How are CBDs going to change if they don't have all of this office space going on? And then what we're finding is that for our real estate workforce, team training is a must. So here's your number one issue. Duh. Remote work and mobility. You know, we know that hybrid work programs are here to stay. Hybrid, everybody says hybrid, but what in form? In what form is that? What's going on right now is a war between the CEOs and the workers. The CEOs want people back in the office. They're very, they're all saying productivity is up with this remote working, but creativity is down. They're worried about their company culture. They're worried about training. They're worried about retaining their employees. The workers, on the other hand, hate commuting. They also loved how efficient it was just working at home, and they also liked the flexibility. The outcomes will depend a lot on the industry and the size of the company. With the space demand, though, no matter how it works out, is going to be permanently lower. And that's not just for office, it's medical, it's education, it's retail, a lot of our retail. Looking out there now, we're seeing office workers back, depending on the city, 25 to 40% are in offices, 40% in the larger top 10 markets. But here's the fact that just blew me away. The US averages, the average worker is back in the office 4.4 days per month. And that is the lowest on the planet. It's higher in Europe, it's higher in Asia, and the very highest is Australia and New Zealand, and they're in 7 days a month. That has huge repercussions for real estate. So we know that office space utilization is permanently lower. And what Fitch Ratings did this study is a really interesting number. If people are out of the office 1.5 days a week, if their usage is down 1.5 days a week, the profitability of that property to the owner drops by 15%. If employees are out 3 days a week, 30%. More family amenities, more things to do. So lots of things leaving. I want to end on a high note. Entrepreneurism is up like mad in America. Entrepreneurial businesses are up now to 38% of total businesses. That's a 20-year high. We haven't been there in 20 years. And so I would advise you to look for new tenants, new businesses, new locations in 2022. So with that, you have our top 10. You don't get to see it. Oh, there it is. There's our top 10 issues for the year. We would love to send you our report if you're interested in it. And I'm going to put, if I can, there we go, our website and RJ Saroy's email up there to get a copy of it. Thank you very much.